Imagine, if you will, you were playing a nice game of Scrabble, and your opponent all of a sudden pulls out an N with a squiggle over it for a whopping 8 points. What the heck is that? Well, it would seem you were actually playing Spanish Scrabble. And that letter is the ñ, which makes the ñ sound. The origin of the ñ dates back to medieval Latin. You see, parchment was expensive, and scribes were eager to take any shortcut they could to save space. One of these was when a letter was followed by an N, they would put said N above the letter. This eventually evolved into the little squiggle we call a tilde. In some non-Spanish languages, words originally had a vowel followed by an N, where the N eventually became a tilde that came to represent nasalization, or a sound change where the velum lowers, allowing air to escape through the nose, or more simply, what happens to a vowel when it's followed by an N. This happened in Estonian with O, in Kikuyu, a Bantu language in Kenya, with I and U, and Portuguese with A and O. Guarani, an indigenous language in Paraguay and surrounding areas, has A, E, I, O, U, and Y with tildes, as well as the familiar ñ, and even a G with a tilde. So cool! In general, Guarani is a really cool language and definitely deserves its own video. But in Spanish, the tilde in the ñ does not represent a nasalization, but rather a palatalization, becoming the ñ sound we know and love. But what about languages that don't have this lovely letter? How do they write the ñ sound? Well, let's take the word España, for example. In French, they use GN, and it becomes España. In Portuguese, they use NH, becoming España. This isn't just in Romance languages. For example, in Vietnamese, they also use NH, becoming Tây Ban Nha. In Catalan, they use NY, and it becomes España. The NY is used in languages like Filipino or Hungarian as well. And English too, right? Well, only sometimes. España isn't a great example, since in English it's just Spain. So let's take a look at another word with an ñ, jalapeño. In English, we would write it as jalapeño. We don't transliterate it at all. And that's because, drumroll please, ñ is a letter in English. Or more so, in English, we see a tilde as a valid diacritical mark over an N, rather than as a whole nother letter like they do in Spanish. But yes, the ñ is part of English. It's part of English words. Sure, words like jalapeno originally come from Spanish, but they're English words too. If I call this pepper a jalapeno, most English speakers would know what I'm talking about, and they would even agree that this is the correct spelling. I'd like to talk about another pepper, this one, the habanero. This is another English word of Spanish origins. Americans are so used to jalapeno and the way it's pronounced that they'll see habanero and try and pronounce it habanero, adding an ñ where there isn't one. That's right, English speakers are so used to ñ that they'll add it to words that don't even have it to try and make it sound more Spanish. Alright, so we've discovered that English has the diacritic tilde, but surely there aren't any more secret diacritics we don't know about, right? Wrong. Let's take a look at the Germanic umlaut. It actually has similar origins to the Spanish ñ. You see, the Germanic languages were experiencing a vowel shift where they went from the back of the mouth to the front. And to denote this, they would put an E after the vowel, which evolved into an E over the letter to save space, which turned into 2 dots. This umlaut exists in English in some loanwords from German, like über. This is not to be confused with the diaeresis, which looks identical to the umlaut but means something else entirely. It doesn't change the way that the letter is pronounced, but instead indicates that it's part of a hiatus. So for example, in the word naive, the diaeresis indicates that this is not a diphthong, so we pronounce the A and I separately, making it naive and not naive. The diaeresis exists in English words like naive and Noel, as well as names like Chloe and Bronte. In addition, you might sometimes see stuff like cooperate if you're reading the New Yorker. Despite looking identical to the umlaut, the diaeresis also has a completely different origin. It comes from Hellenistic Greek, before they had invented putting spaces between words. And they needed something to put at the beginning of a word to signify a new word. It actually looked basically identical to its modern use, 2 dots over the vowel. Another diacritical mark in English is the cedilla. This is the little curvy thing under the C in words like facade. While most of the words in English that have a cedilla come from French, the cedilla itself originates in a much cooler country, Spain, as the little bottom part of the letter Z. In fact, the word cedilla comes from the Spanish for little zeta, zeta being the Old Spanish equivalent of the letter zeta, or Z. Speaking of zeta, it found its way into Spanish when Latin borrowed the letter zeta from Greek. Because Latin did not have a th sound, they chose not to borrow the Greek theta. But in the 15th century, in the Iberian Peninsula, there began to evolve a distinction between the letter esse and theta and the, with theta being pronounced th. And no, before you say anything, this is not a lisp, and it didn't even originate with a Spanish king who had a lisp. Don't trust everything you see on the internet. But this meant that there was now a letter named theta who made the th sound, making it indistinguishable from the letter that the Romans passed up on in all ways but looks. Anyways, let's take a look at another diacritic, the ring. Admittedly, this one is only present in select few words in English, mostly proper nouns like Holland. Its origin is very similar to the ñ and the umlaut we've already looked at, starting as an O over the A to represent roundedness of the vowel, and didn't really change too much from there. It certainly changed a lot less than the umlaut did. I still don't get how they got 2 dots from an E. Now for a lightning round of the other diacritics that are very rarely used in English. We've got acute accent, grave accent, circumflex, macron, breve, hachek, and this weird hook thing from Vietnamese. My personal favorite is the circumflex because it gives the letter a little hat, and I think that's really cool. Have a nice day! Hey guys, thanks for watching this far. I just want to show y'all something I found while researching for this video. When I initially looked up diacritics, the stupid dumb Google AI popped up and showed me this. It did manage to get the tilde and the cedilla right, but it thinks that an O is a U, and in the word angstroms, which has both an A with ring and O with umlaut, it can't find either. And even worse, in the word cooperate, it thinks that the diaeresis is the ligature ash, which is a really cool letter that I really want to talk about in a future video, but yeah, AI is dumb and does not deserve our water or our electricity or our jobs. Peace.